Hey everyone, welcome to the Acrobatic Arts Podcast. I'm Loren, and I will be interviewing some of the top leaders and innovators from the dance and acrobatic industry. If you are a teacher, performer, student, or a lifelong learner like myself, you are sure to find these episodes intriguing and full of inspiration. Acrobatic Arts is passionate about providing current and relevant information for everyone. So please, sit back and enjoy as we share our passion with you and the world. We are thrilled to have Dr. Leisha Strachan with us once again. As many of you know, Dr. Strachan is a brilliant sports psychology consultant and a regular on our show every season. Her insights have guided so many of us through the mental challenges that come with training, performing, and competing. Today, she'll be answering some of the most common questions we've received on our social channels and that we get asked during our certification courses. Dr. Leisha Strachan, hello and welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me again. I love being here.
For those who may be new to the podcast or unfamiliar with your background, could you share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do in the world of sports?
Sure. I am originally here from Winnipeg, Manitoba, here on Treaty 1 land. I grew up in the sport of baton twirling. I competed as an athlete for 18 years and had a chance to represent Canada at 7 World Championships, and I have a couple of medals from those championships, and that has always been a huge blessing. And I've been coaching now for quite a while, over 30 years, and coaching the same sport. And in terms of educational background, I have my PhD in sports psychology from Queen's University, and I've been a professor at the University of Manitoba since 2009. So this is going to be my 15th year as a professor.
Wow. And if you haven't met Dr. Leisha Strachan or read her bio, I encourage everyone to go and do that. It's absolutely wonderful, and you can get to know her a little bit better. Now, I'd love to dive into some common questions that we at Acrobatic Arts hear from Acro teachers. So here's the first one. We are introducing Acrobatic Arts exams at our studio for the first time, and I'm a little bit out of my depth because I never did them as a dancer myself. I have a 9-year-old who's really nervous about her upcoming exam, and to be honest, I'm not sure how to prepare her. Any advice on how to help both of us feel more confident about this new experience?
Thanks for that question. That's a wonderful question. And I identify with it so much because I grew up, as I said, I grew up in baton, but I came to dance a little bit later. I didn't start dancing till I was 11, and I never did any dance exams. I was just really purely using it for technique and for learning more about my body in terms of using it in the context of baton. So I understand that. And that you've never gone through it before. And sometimes that's a good thing, because sometimes when we have gone through an experience, if it wasn't a good experience or if it was, we tend to project that. So I think it's good that you can both come into the situation with fresh eyes. I would say, your child's 9 years old. There are lots of different anxieties that the kids can feel at 9. One of the first things I would say right away is thinking about how to reframe that feeling that your child has in terms of whether it's excitement or whether it's nervousness. I like to use the example with my own younger athletes that the way that they feel Christmas morning when you have butterflies and you're excited and, you have sweaty palms probably because you're looking forward to the day, that wouldn't be interpreted as nervousness. You'd say that is exciting. However, it's a lot of the same physiological markers that are shown for excitement and for nervousness. So I like to ask that question, be like, oh, how do you know you're nervous, right? And then when do you feel that same feeling? And do you feel it when you're excited about something? And then I ask them, how do you know you're not excited about this experience instead of being nervous? A lot of them aren't sure. And usually it then comes down to explaining to them about perception and how you perceive a situation. That it's okay to feel a little bit, nervous, if we're going to use that, but your body might also be telling you that you're excited about doing the exam and that you're ready for it. So I think changing their psyche a little bit that way would help. Of course, I'm hoping that a lot of studios might do this already, but having a mock exam or being able to recreate that experience as much as possible before they have the experience, I think is important. If you're able to set up the room exactly how it's going to look, bring in, someone that doesn't necessarily need to know anything about acro to sit there and ask the skills, whether you have the skills written out on a sheet of paper, something like that, and sort of recreating what that experience would be and having a practice exam. I think that's a really great strategy to at least have them be able to visualize and see themselves in that situation before it actually happens. And the last thing I would say is just reminding people that, or young people, that they're here for fun, that the adjudicator, whoever is there, they want to be entertained. They want to, they want to be there and have a good time along with you. And I know that the training that acrobatic arts adjudicators get is really about, seeing all the positive things, really working to make people feel as comfortable as possible in the situation. So you can say, you're really all in that together, and just go in with a sense of enjoyment, and just remember why you do acro and what you really love about it, and just bring that joy to your exam.
And now we'll move on to another question. And this one is from an acro teacher. And we do get this one quite a bit on our social media. So this acro teacher has an 11-year-old who's great in practice, but falls apart on stage. Any ideas about what we can do in practice and or right before the performance to help bring what we know she can do in practice and bring it to the stage?
That is a fantastic question, and you get it a lot because it happens a lot. It happens in all stages of development, not just for 11-year-olds, but for younger and for older performers as well. So I think this is a great question to think about. When I work with young people, I think one of the things that I have to reinforce with them is that any type of mental skill takes practice. So you might suggest something to a young person that they use right away, and maybe it works, and then they bought into it and it's great. But we know that many times you might suggest something, they might use it, maybe it doesn't help them, and then right away they're turned off of maybe using any type of mental skill or pre-performance routine or something to sort of get them ready. So I like to remind teachers and young people that you're developing a recipe for yourself. So two things, the recipe and the toolbox. So for the first thing for your recipe is figuring out what your recipe is to perform. That when we, bake or do things in the kitchen, you usually follow a recipe. And the first time anybody did that recipe, it likely wasn't perfect. They likely had to try something, then they had to write it down, reflect on it, change it, make sure, they're trying to get it as consistent as possible. And even sometimes I know that when I'm baking or something, I might use the exact same recipe, and sometimes it doesn't even turn out the exact same way every time. But you are at least working towards as positive a result as possible. So you have to have a lot of patience in terms of developing your recipe, and that takes time. It's not something that happens over one season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons. It takes a little bit of time to learn that about yourself. But the earlier that this person is starting, so it's an 11-year-old, fantastic. That's a really great age to start being really conscious and aware about what their recipe is. And the other thing about the toolbox is that we have to try to teach them as many different tools that they can use as possible, so that when they need their go-to tool, it's in that toolbox. But also if they need to use something else that maybe isn't used as much as they would normally use it, that it's there and they've learned about it and it's something that they can insert when they need it. So some of those common things I would say in a recipe is really thinking about their pre-performance routine and the things that they do from the night before until they get to the performance that's going to be really helpful to them in terms of getting ready. And as an 11-year-old, it might seem simple, but I think getting them to think about what their top 5 things are in terms of getting ready, and a way of kind of doing that with your student is, or with a group of students, is to have them think about, okay, what are the things that when I'm watching a performer who I really, really love watching, what are some of the things that, when they're preparing that might work for them? Or what do you think would be things that you need to do to prepare, and just have them like write a list. And then from that list, have them pick out, 4 or 5 things that they think are things that they need to get ready. So, it might be from starting the night before, getting my bag ready and feeling organized. It might be before I go to bed, running through my routines in my head and doing a little bit of imagery and maybe some breathing technique. Getting up in the morning, having a really good breakfast, or whatever that routine is. Maybe listening to the music in the car so that they feel a little more prepared. And then when they get there, finding out what that routine is when they arrive. Arriving, whether you want to go to the dressing room, whether you need to put your ear pods in or not, whether you need to be social or not, like all those things are things that you have to just discover as they're going through the process and developing and growing as performers. So thinking about the pre-performance routine, and then really then also thinking about self-talk and what are some of the things that are running around in their heads before they compete. That's, I think, the hardest thing as a teacher, is that we don't ever really know what they're thinking exactly. And so trying to have them think a little bit more about that. What are some things that words and phrases that might help me to feel more prepared or encouraged? What are some things I would like my teacher to tell me that I can share with her that might be helpful to me, or things that are not helpful as well are important. And that comes down then to a lot of reflection. And sometimes with my own athletes, I'll have a post competition reflection, little short questionnaire that actually have them complete as soon as possible after the competition. So maybe the next time that we're together, and just have them reflect on, like, how did you feel when you arrived? How did you feel between routines? So between your solo routine and your group routine. If you had a routine that didn't go so well, what are some things that you did to get you back on track? And I always end with a question about, how can I help you as a coach, or how can I help you as a teacher? What are some things that you might like to let me know about how you prepare, that I can use and put in my own toolbox as well, as I'm working with a lot of different other performers. So hopefully that's helpful. I know it's a lot of different things and strategies, but it is a really important piece about performing and having young people trying to feel as confident as they possibly can when they're approaching competition.
I think it's always good to have a lot of options. And Dr. Leisha, you definitely provided us with a lot of tools that people can choose from. This next question, even if you're not in Acro, you can definitely relate to it. I think we all can. But the question is, it's actually a sort of a scenario or a situation that has happened, but a student just tore her ACL and can't compete, but wants to stay as engaged as possible when she recovers. What can she be doing while she physically can't move, but that will help her be stronger mentally for what's ahead?
Wow, it's a great question. Dealing with injuries, always a tough thing. I think even before, it's a good thing, I think, to even think about those what if scenarios before, because we know injuries, we don't want them to happen, but they tend to happen in inopportune moments sometimes. So I think it's important first to kind of think about how you want to deal with injury, even before the season or with the group. If someone does get hurt, how are ways that we would want to keep that person as a group and team engaged in what we're doing. I know we're really getting the dance community with come to class anyway. But it's not just about coming and seeing choreography. It's about having that person still feel part of community, because injuries can be quite isolating, especially if it's a big injury like an ACL. I think it's really important to always build community and keep kids in community and with their friends, but also with their teachers, and get encouragement from that, because that's just going to be very uplifting. So, of course, we want them to be there and engaged. I mean, if they can still engage in some of the sort of core strengthening pieces, maybe there can be a mat in the corner and that person can be still, doing some of the ab exercises or doing some things that are very, very light just to kind of keep them in it. But I would say the purpose of that is less about conditioning, right, and more about community. So a different C, I guess, there. Also, I think if there are other tasks that that person can be helpful with to a teacher, so as simple as whether during class they can transfer files onto a memory stick, or play the music, or kind of be that extra kind of like assistant help. We know the kids, I think young people at whatever age do like that feeling helpful, like you want to be able to feel like you're engaged and feeling helpful and feeling useful. So I think if there are ways to keep them engaged, even if it's going to competition and still helping with people carry things, or they can't really carry things, but just kind of be there to kind of help, walk someone to the stage or do that kind of stuff. I think that's also really important. So I would say the main thing about this answer, I think, is engagement and keeping kids engaged.
The next question is from a teacher, and they say, one of my advanced STAR students retired last year and is now teaching beginners and is feeling really frustrated. How can I help her adjust her expectations and teaching style?
That is a fantastic question. And, I think I deal with that myself as a coach too, right? Adjusting expectations and teaching style is so important, and it really comes down to mentorship, and how much mentorship that you can provide to that student. So I think definitely if they're coming off of being a really, really strong performer and student, and then they're going to teach younger people, they have that huge expectation about how training's going to go, how practice is going to go, the number of hours I need to practice, number of hours I need to be there, when it's a whole different mindset. So I think first is having a conversation with them about what your expectations are for children participating at that level of engagement. I think even, finding some things online, finding some things that might be helpful to understand a little bit about child development, right? And what kids need. From my own experience and own reading, the elements of fun are just so important. And so whether they're older or younger, but at a different level of performance, that I think it's really important then to understand what fun is, and to understand what they may find fun doing within their class. So a lot of kids that age find a lot of fun in performing for others. They find a lot of fun in their teacher being involved in their class, like actually being active and doing things across the floor with them, or doing things. Obviously being encouraging, being thoughtful, being a good role model for them. So I think having conversations about what that means, I think is really important. I think as well, being able to give them some opportunities to even teach or engage at that higher level too. Just to, they might really want to maybe teach at that level, which I think is really important. It's a different skill set to teach the younger ones than it is to teach the ones that are maybe a little more competitive already, but maybe still younger. So, so it's not always when I think people or young people retire that they need to like go back and teach recreational. Like sometimes they don't have the skills for that right away, and they need to develop those skills and understand empathy, compassion, right? They need to build all of those things, and how it is to teach young people, which is a whole different skill set. So I think there needs to be a lot more training around that. And as I said, mentorship. They need to maybe take a year to work with another teacher instead of having their own class right away, which I think is sometimes a pitfall to having people be frustrated. And then sometimes when you're frustrated, you then disengage and you don't want to be a part of it anymore. So we want to keep people in dance, in the community, right? As young teachers or choreographers, or they might be adjudicators or dance directors or competition directors. Like there's a lot of different roles that young people can play. So it doesn't always have to be teaching, but if it is, I think that year or maybe sometimes two of mentorship with a strong teacher who's really good at teaching that age level so they can see what the expectation is and actually be able to visualize that.
All right, this next question is very common, and we do get this one quite a bit. So the teacher says that I am noticing a lot that my up and coming students get really upset and frustrated, and there's a lot of quitting when they can't perform a new skill immediately. Instead of digging in and pushing themselves, they literally give up. Am I alone in this? And I can say, no, you're not alone in this. How do I get them to see the value of hard work?
Wow, that's a great question. To see the value of hard work. It's that element of persistence and being able to persist through things, I think is something that's difficult to teach. And so I can feel your frustration even in that question of, how do we keep talented kids from not giving up and quitting? So I think it's just important to just reframe, first of all, what winning is, what progress is. I think there's a lot of self-comparisons or comparisons to others, sorry, that they would use as they're developing. And so if you see someone in class who's being rewarded all the time and they're doing well at competitions and you start comparing yourself to that person, then sometimes that can lead to frustration and then not being able to do things, and maybe you think, well, I'll never be able to do that, so I'm just gonna quit and not even try, which is not the right attitude. But I think if we can focus more on self-referenced development in terms of having them dial more closely into how they're developing themselves as a person and as a dancer, and that might be by keeping their own little practice journal that you might have in class, and maybe end of class they can pick it up and sort of write down how their progress is going. Maybe there's certain benchmarks that you would like them to get to, whether it's splits, whether it's a certain level of performance, whatever it is, that it's something that they can try to track in a very measurable way so that they can have their own goals related to that development, and they can develop themselves, because then then as a performer that I'm getting better, but it's just me against myself, right? And I'm not being compared to others right away. There's a lot of time for comparison in a competition season that they're going to get at competitions. So let's focus more on their self-reference development so that they might feel a little more motivated, right? It's all about creating more opportunities to keep them as motivated as possible and engaged and happy, right? And feeling like they're fulfilled in their experience. And part of that might, just come to redefining what progress is or redefining what winning is within your own studio.
And not surprisingly, we do have another question about competition. And this one says, our competition team has kids ranging in ages from about 7 to 18 years old. As we prepare for the upcoming season, I'd like to implement a goal-setting workshop for my students, but I'm not sure how to introduce it effectively to my younger students. Do you have any ideas or activities that could help them understand and apply this concept?
Great question. Goal setting for younger people can seem very intimidating, and even for older people when it's not done properly. I think one of the common pitfalls with goal setting is that we might we have the best intentions to do goal setting right at the beginning of the season. We set goals, we put them up there, and the pitfall is we never go back to them. We never take time to really go back, whether it's every 2 months or every 3 months to go back and like really look at your goals and what they are. So I think right away with the younger people, remembering that they're not mini adults, they are young people. So they have different ways of going in this world, different ways of cognitively thinking and discerning information. So their goals have to be very, very concrete for younger people. They can help you make these goals, but they have to be things that they really can see in terms of developing. So any activities around, having them do it as a group, maybe it's not really individual for the young people, maybe it's more as a group and kind of brainstorming. I just recently did a goal setting session with some younger people, and I think what worked really well right away is just thinking about a performer who they love to watch. It could be someone in their studio, an older performer. It could be someone usually for younger people, it's someone who they see more often. So usually a strong person in your studio that they enjoy watching. And then we start thinking about what are those qualities that that person has that you really admire, right? So it could be that they work hard, that they are nice to everyone, right? That they have really good, flexibility, that they're able to turn really, really well. They're kind of like an overall really good performer. And we write down some of those qualities. And then, you can talk about why those qualities are important, but then have them think about which one of those do they really want to develop for the season. So it could be just one. Maybe for one of them, it's flexibility. It's like, I really like to work on my flexibility. And then they can make some goals, right? Monthly goals related to flexibility. And we know that's a lot simpler to think about instead of thinking about like being a good performer, for example, right? So we had one young person, the youngest person, and her main goal was determined, which is funny because it relates to the last question. She's like, I'm trying to make some goals related to me being more determined. I was like, oh, okay, that's a tough one, right? To think of concrete goals related to determination. So I had her kind of try to analyze without saying inner dialogue, but what's going on in her head a little bit more. So I'm like, so what are some of the things that you might say in class in your head that make you less determined? And, they might say, well, I just give up, or, I'm kind of, I watch them do something and I know that I can't do that yet. And so I just like give up on it. Okay, well, let's make a goal then that, at least for now, once every class in your head, you're going to say something positive and encouraging to yourself. And then we thought about what that phrase might be, right? So what's a phrase that's good for you? Is it, you got this? Or is it, you can do it? Or maybe there's another phrase that really means something to you. So I want you to like really think about in class, at least once every class, that you're going to say that to yourself. And then, as the year goes on, that's why it's important then to do goal setting a little more frequently, because if we try to do it from September and ask her again in June, it's going to be gone, right? So it's a good reminder that and that, I need to work on this. And the last thing for little ones, or for anyone too, is to make sure it's visible, that we're putting them up, whether it's a poster board that's up with sticky notes that they're putting up their goals, something that they will pass by and see, and then something that's easily adjustable. So with post-it notes, you can say, okay, go take your post-it note from like last month, look at it. Did you get your goal? Great. If you did, fantastic. If you didn't, think about, or if you did, move on and think about another goal that can progress you forward. Or think about, okay, it's a good reminder. I really have to think about this goal. So I think those little activities where they can see things are really great. I remember a few podcasts ago, we were talking about youth development pieces. And I went to this gymnastics gym that had kids think about monthly goals, and they did it with a theme of that month. So for example, February, because Valentine's Day was there, their shape was hearts, and that was their theme. So they had pieces of paper that were in the shape of hearts, and you would write a weekly goal on that piece of paper, and then you'd put it up, and it was like all around the room. And the teacher had read something about the importance of like surrounding yourself with positivity. And so they had sort of all around the gym, there were these hearts that were everywhere. And sort of once you were able to accomplish that, then, you I don't know if you got a sticker or you got something and you're able to take your heart home. And the next month was March, so they had shamrocks. And the next month was April, so they thought about umbrellas for like April showers. And next one was May, and they had flowers. So like there's a lot of different ways of thinking about that, but I thought that was also very meaningful for young people to kind of think about something really visual.
I'm going to even ask maybe a follow-up question. How would goal setting differ from class to class versus a competition goal?
I think from class to class, you're really thinking about what those progress goals are, right? And maybe when you're thinking more competition, you're thinking more of outcome. And I'm not saying outcome as in winning or losing. That doesn't have to be the outcome that you're worried that you're thinking about. No, for some people, it might be like, I really want to get this standard at this competition, which is okay to also have. But then we also want to think about goals that they have full control over in competition as well. So whether it's like for each of my routines that I want to really work on my performance part, or I'm really going to think about my facials, or I'm really going to, be sure I'm thinking about this particular part of the routine that's really important that maybe I messed up last time. So I think the daily or the weekly goals are just very progress oriented, which we know will help them in the end with their outcome. But the competition goals can be just more specific to an outcome and of course a shorter time frame than they would be with the progress goals.
And we have one more question. This one is a teacher, and they say they have a student who was gaining confidence in doing back handsprings. However, after one repetition where the dancer slipped and landed poorly, she's become really freaked out and can no longer do them. She's lost a lot of confidence and is afraid to try again. How can I help her overcome this fear and regain her skill?
That's a great question. There are a few things that just come up top of my head. One of the first things is just a reminder to that student that their physical skills often remain stable. If they're able to do something, that means that their body is able to do it. It's the psychological things going on in our heads that really kind of hold us back from being able to realize that physical potential. So it's really important to remind them that you've done it before and that we just need to figure out how we're going to change your mindset so that you can do that and that they have full control over that. I think often if they're able to do a skill and then all of a sudden not able to do it, they really feel like they're out of control and it's not something that they can actually fix. So we want to just remind them that it is something within their control. That's something that we're just going to need to work on. And this is why it's really important to help develop or keep developing that toolbox. Imagery is a really powerful tool. And if it's used properly and if it's used consistently and kids can really think about how to try to manipulate their images a little bit more to help them and really visualize themselves not falling, I think that's really important. When I'm doing imagery, like I see myself shining in my images. Like I'm rocking it. I'm doing great. But even this year in some work with athletes in baton, they were telling me that, there's sometimes that in their images, they're seeing themselves drop or they're seeing themselves not accomplish something. And I was like, in your image, like in your own head, like what? So reminding that they have to use positive imagery and they have to be able to imagine themselves in their head accomplishing that skill and what that looks like. If you can talk them through as they're doing their image as a teacher, talk them through all the phases of it, right? Where you need to be, giving them some keywords to help them with their confidence, right? Giving them a phrase, something that's just going to help them go and kind of release their mind a little bit. Talking them through the image and the imagery, I think is really important. And then working on their own confidence, right? Just generally their own confidence, their own sort of mantra that they have, their own affirmations. There's a lot of different workshops and things out there on the internet on how to help develop positive affirmations and the importance of putting them up so they're visible. If they can, again, use that positive self-talk to help them along with positive images, right? And then also a reminder that they have control over the manipulation of that image, and also control over their body and their psyche and their mindset going into it. I think that's an important thing. If you feel like they need to, go back a progression, maybe that will be helpful to sort of lead up to it again. Some might feel if I'm going back, then my teacher feels like I can't do it, right? And they might take that personally, but reminding them that it is about the journey, right? And so sometimes in order to launch yourself forward, you have to take a step back. I think I have used that before with launching an arrow. You have to pull back the arrow before you can go forward. And sometimes that momentum of just going backwards a little bit, backwards a step, so that then you can launch yourself forward, might also be an important image to sort of think about.
Dr. Leisha Strachan, your advice is always so applicable to everyone. And I really think the teachers are going to love hearing your answers and all the tools that you have given them. So thank you for that. Now, I also know that you were watching the Summer Olympics that were happening a couple months ago. And I'm just wondering, do you have any big takeaways that you thought about or that you saw at the past Summer Olympics?
Yeah, you want another hour podcast from it. Thank you very much for those kind words. And I'm always really grateful to be able to share some tips, and hopefully it's helpful. In terms of the Olympics, I mean, I find it's just a fantastic ground for learning about humanity. That's in the end, we're all humans going through this crazy experience of sport or activity together. And so I think that's one of my main takeaways, is remembering that we're all human. Of course, fantastic stories of success, and we love seeing that. But what I really like that was also being broadcast were stories of disappointment, and sometimes of regret. And those are hard to see, but we know that there are so many important lessons that come from that as well. And although it's hard to see in the moment, those things I think are just really important, I think, for everybody to see. We like to show all the success and all the great things. And I think Simone Biles at the last Olympics kind of started to teach us that a little bit, that, like there might be situations where you have to step away, or sometimes things don't go exactly how you planned, but it's how you come back from that. And seeing those stories of resilience, I think, are really important. And then, following some of those athletes as they now gear up for another season, and what are some things that they're taking away. And so I think that's what I just love about watching the Olympic Games, is that there's usually something for everybody. There's a lot of common humanity that happens within the games, and to know that you're not alone through many situations, whether they're very joyful or whether they can be devastating. I think we can learn by watching the successes and disappointments of others, and seeing the grace that people accept, some of the failures that they might have, and that's okay, that we're all going to go through it at some point, but it's, how you're going to handle it on the other side. And I think that's kind of one of my main takeaways from watching.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Strachan, for your fantastic advice today.
Thank you so much. And just wishing everyone a safe and fun dance season. So enjoy it.
Thank you, Dr. Strachan, for your fantastic advice today. For more tips and insights, follow us on social media and let us know what topics you'd like us to dive into next. Make sure to subscribe to the Acrobatic Arts Podcast so you never miss an episode, and share it with your community to help spread the knowledge. Until next time, keep training smart and stay inspired. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great day.